Right then, let's talk about tariffs, specifically the trade war Trump started with China. This trade war wasn't just a minor skirmish, it was a full-blown economic battle that had far-reaching consequences for both nations and the global economy. The stakes were high and the rhetoric was even higher. It's like that episode of The Simpsons where Homer opens a casino in his garage, except with less gambling and more global economic instability. The humor in the show mirrors the absurdity of the situation, where economic policies were being decided with the same unpredictability as a roll of the dice. Trump slapped massive tariffs on Chinese goods, claiming they were killing American jobs and stealing our intellectual property. These tariffs were supposed to be a shield, protecting American industries from unfair competition. But the reality was far more complex. He promised these tariffs would bring back manufacturing jobs and force China to play fair. The idea was to level the playing field, to make it fairer for American workers and businesses. But promises are easy to make and much harder to keep. Sound familiar? It should, because it's the same song and dance politicians have been doing for decades. Every election cycle, we hear the same promises of bringing back jobs and revitalizing industries. Yet the results often fall short of the grandiose claims. The problem is tariffs are like trying to put out a fire with gasoline. They might seem like a quick fix, but they often exacerbate the problem. Instead of solving the underlying issues, they create new ones. Sure, you might get a temporary burst of heat, but you're ultimately just making things worse. The initial impact might look like progress, but the long-term effects can be devastating. And that's precisely what's happened with Trump's trade war. Instead of revitalizing American manufacturing, it led to factory closures and job losses. The very people it was supposed to help ended up suffering the most. Instead of bringing back jobs, it's cost us jobs. The tariffs led to higher costs for businesses, which in turn led to layoffs and closures. The ripple effect was felt across the economy. Instead of making America more competitive, it's made us less competitive. Businesses struggled to cope with the increased costs, and many found it hard to compete in the global market. The intended boost to American industry turned into a burden, and instead of forcing China to back down, it's only strengthened their resolve. China adapted to the new tariffs, finding ways to mitigate their impact, and even turning the situation to their advantage. The trade war, rather than weakening China, ended up showcasing their resilience and adaptability. One of the biggest whoppers Trump peddled was that these tariffs would rake in trillions for the US Treasury. He painted a picture of a financial windfall that would solve many of the country's economic woes. According to him, the tariffs were a masterstroke, a brilliant strategy that would fill the coffers of the US Treasury with ease. He boasted about it constantly, claiming it was like taking candy from a baby. In his speeches, he often emphasized how simple and effective this approach was, making it sound like a no-brainer. The crowds cheered and the media buzzed with his bold claims. Well, turns out the baby had a nasty right hook. The reality of the situation was far more complex and less rosy than Trump had led everyone to believe. The tariffs didn't just hit their intended targets, they also had unintended consequences that were felt across various sectors of the economy. The reality is, tariff revenue has fallen far short of Trump's predictions. Instead of the promised trillions, the actual figures were much more modest. The anticipated financial windfall never materialized, leaving many to question the effectiveness of the tariffs. In fact, it's been an absolute drop in the bucket compared to the damage it's inflicted on the US economy. Many businesses struggle to cope with the increased costs, leading to closures and job losses. The ripple effects were felt far and wide, impacting not just the targeted industries but also the broader economy. As of April 2025, tariff revenue is only bringing in a paltry $285 million a day. This figure is a stark contrast to the grandiose claims made by Trump. Analysts have pointed out that the revenue generated is insufficient to offset the economic disruptions caused by the tariffs. That's a far cry from the $2 billion a day Trump promised. The discrepancy between the promised and actual revenue has led to widespread criticism and skepticism about the effectiveness of the tariffs. Many have called for a re-evaluation of the policy, arguing that the costs far outweigh the benefits. And while it's slightly higher than the $128 million a day under Biden, it's hardly the economic windfall Trump made it out to be. The modest increase in revenue has done little to alleviate the broader economic challenges, and many are left wondering if the tariffs were worth the trouble. This whole thing reminds me of that time I tried to make my own beer in my bathtub. It seemed like a fun and cost-effective idea at first. I imagined myself enjoying a cold, homemade brew without having to spend a fortune at the store. It seemed like a good idea at the time, but it ended up costing me a fortune in plumbing bills and smelling like a brewery exploded in my bathroom. Just like my ill-fated brewing experiment, the tariffs seemed promising but ultimately led to more problems than solutions. The lesson here is clear: sometimes what seems like an easy win can turn into a costly mistake. Now, you might be thinking, well, surely China's just rolling over and taking it, right? Oh, bless your heart. You see, China doesn't play that game. They're like the Liam Neeson of global trade. They will find you and they will retaliate. And retaliate they did. China slapped tariffs of their own on American goods, targeting industries that were crucial to Trump's base, like agriculture. It was a classic case of economic mutually assured destruction. Both sides were lobbing tariffs back and forth like grenades, and the only ones getting hurt were the innocent bystanders, American consumers and businesses. Sure, there have been some minor concessions along the way. The US exempted some Chinese electronics from tariffs, and China considered doing the same for certain American goods. But these were just band-aids on a gaping economic wound. So, who's really footing the bill for this trade war? Well, it's you, the American consumer. Congratulations. You get to pay more for everything from washing machines to iPhones. Thanks, tariffs. US consumers are now facing the highest average tariff rate in over a century, a whopping 28%. That's like going to a restaurant, ordering a $10 burger, and then getting hit with a $2.80 tariff surcharge. And don't even get me started on consumer confidence. It's plummeted faster than a drunken trapeze artist. The University of Michigan's Consumer Sentiment Index took an 11% nosedive in March 2025, while the Conference Board reported a 12-year low. It seems the only thing Americans are confident about these days is that they're getting screwed. Section 5. Jobs on the line, from cars to crops. Remember all those manufacturing jobs Trump promised to bring back? He painted a picture of bustling factories and thriving communities, where the American worker would once again be the backbone of the economy. Well, they're about as real as a unicorn riding a dragon. Instead of a resurgence, we've seen a decline, with factories closing their doors and workers left in the lurch. In fact, the tariffs have done the opposite, leading to layoffs across multiple industries. The very policies meant to protect American jobs have backfired, causing more harm than good. The auto industry in particular has been hit hard. Once a symbol of American ingenuity and strength, it now struggles to keep its head above water. Stellantis, General Motors, and Volvo have all announced layoffs, totaling over 2,000 jobs. These are not just numbers. They represent real people with families and dreams. And it's not just the auto industry feeling the pain. The ripple effects are being felt across various sectors, from steel to electronics, affecting countless lives. Yale's Budget Lab forecasts a whopping 770,000 US job losses by the end of 2025 due to these tariffs. This isn't just a statistic, it's a looming crisis. That's more people than live in Wyoming, folks. Imagine an entire state wiped off the employment map, and let's not forget about the agricultural sector. Farmers, the backbone of our food supply, are facing unprecedented challenges. They're in the midst of a full-blown crisis, thanks to China's retaliatory tariffs. These tariffs have created a hostile environment for American agricultural products. Farmers are facing canceled orders, plummeting prices, and mountains of unsold goods. The financial strain is pushing many to the brink of bankruptcy. It's enough to make you want to go full grapes of wrath and drive your tractor off a cliff. The despair is palpable, and the future looks uncertain for many. Section 6. American Agriculture, a Harvest of Despair. China, once a voracious consumer of American agricultural products, has essentially slammed the door shut on U.S. farmers. They've halted purchases of key exports like pork, soybeans, and lumber, leaving American farmers high and dry. The USDA reported China's largest pork order cancellation since 2020, a staggering 12,000 tons. That's enough pork to fill the Grand Canyon, folks. Exporters are facing canceled shipments, goods stuck in transit, and the daunting task of finding alternative markets for their products. It's like trying to sell ice to Eskimos, only much, much harder. The Port of Oakland, once a bustling hub for agricultural exports, is now resembling a ghost town. Section 7. A Global Trade Tsunami. The ripple effects of Trump's trade war have been felt far beyond American shores. It's like someone chucked a bowling ball into the global economy, and now everyone's scrambling for cover. South Africa's citrus industry is bracing for potential job losses of up to 35,000. The Republic of Ireland's pharmaceutical sector is at risk of losing up to 80,000 jobs. And Mexico is sweating bullets over the possibility of 400,000 job losses. It's a stark reminder that in our interconnected world, what happens in one country doesn't stay in one country. When the US sneezes, the rest of the world catches a cold. And right now, the US economy is hacking up a lung. Section 8. Adding salt to the wound, the SHIPS Act. As if things weren't bad enough, Congress decided to pile on with the SHIPS Act. This delightful piece of legislation imposes new port fees on Chinese-made vessels, which, you guessed it, further complicates American agricultural exports. It's like trying to put out a fire by throwing gasoline on it, then hitting it with a hammer for good measure. Containerized agricultural exports, which make up a quarter of U.S. agriculture by volume and more than half by value, are now facing even more hurdles. It's enough to make you wonder if anyone in Washington actually understands how the economy works. Section 9. A tariff storm raging on. So there you have it. Trump's trade war with China, a dumpster fire of epic proportions. It's cost us jobs, raised prices for consumers, devastated the agricultural industry, and destabilized the global economy. And for what? Some vague notion of winning that exists only in the minds of Trump and his most ardent supporters. It's enough to make you want to scream into the void. Or, just pour yourself a stiff drink and try to forget about the impending economic apocalypse.